All right, today we're diving headfirst into the really complex and, let's be honest, often confusing world of cybercrime law. And to do that, we're going to try and untangle what is truly a legal maze: Europe.
So let's just start with the biggest question right out of the gate. How in the world do you police a crime that doesn't care about borders? I mean, think about it. A hacker in one country can hit a server in another, bounce their signal through 10 more, all in a matter of seconds. For law enforcement, this is an absolute nightmare.
And that is exactly why Europe is such a fascinating test case. You've got this patchwork quilts of different countries, different languages, and deeply, deeply rooted legal traditions, all squeezed together. It's kind of the perfect place to see this global problem play out in miniature. Now, in an effort to get everyone on the same page, there are really two big, overarching groups trying to create some kind of consistency. They're tackling what's known as the harmonization challenge. So you've got two main players. On one side, there's the Council of Europe. That's the bigger group with 47 members. They created this huge comprehensive blueprint called the Convention on Cybercrime. Then you have the European Union, the more politically and economically connected group of 27. They use what are called framework decisions to basically force their members to get their laws in line. So yeah, two very different ways of getting to the same goal. But here's the thing. Underneath all those efforts, there's a much older, much deeper split that makes everything way more complicated. And that's the divide between common law and civil law. And the differences here are pretty stark. Common law systems, like you'd find in the UK or Ireland, are built on precedent. What did other judges decide in similar cases? The courtroom is all about an adversarial battle of arms. But in civil law systems, like in the Netherlands, it's all about detailed written legal codes. The judge is way more active, almost like an investigator trying to find the truth. You can see how these are just fundamentally different philosophies of justice. Okay, to really get how these systems work, we need two quick Latin terms that are key to both. First up is actus reus. That's just the physical act, the thing you actually did. Then there's mens rea. That's the mental part, the guilty mind, the intent to do the thing. To get a conviction, prosecutors almost always have to prove both. All right, so with that legal groundwork laid, let's get into what cybercrime actually is. The Cybercrime Convention gives us a really helpful way to break it all down into three big categories. So here's the framework. First, you've got crimes that are committed against the computer itself. Second, you have old school crimes that just happen to use a computer as a tool. And finally, you have crimes where the digital content is the illegal part. Let's tackle each one. Okay, category one. This is what you probably think of as hardcore cybercrime, right? These are attacks aimed directly at computers and networks. We're talking hacking, viruses, denial of service attacks, the whole shebang. And of course, the most famous of these is hacking. The legal definition is pretty simple on the surface: intentionally accessing a computer system without right. But what does without right actually mean in practice? Well, that's where it gets tricky. This is just a perfect example of how common law changes over time. So get this. In 1998, an English court said that some police officers who used a police computer for personal stuff hadn't broken the law because, hey, they were allowed to use the computer. But just a year later, another case came along and totally changed the game. The court refined the rule, saying, nope, the second you look at data you have no business looking at for your job, your access becomes unauthorized. You can literally see the law evolving to keep up. Another one of these crimes against the computer is data interference, basically malware and viruses. A super famous case was the guy in the Netherlands who made the Kornikova virus. He sent out emails disguised as a picture of the tennis player, and bam, it infected computers worldwide. For that, he got 150 hours of community service. So let's move on to our second category, crimes where the computer is just the modern-day weapon of choice. We're talking about things like fraud or forgery, but doing them online forced the legal system to wrestle with some really weird philosophical questions. Just look at how Dutch law had to twist and turn to keep up. Back in '91, a court said a temporary computer file could count as a writing for a forgery charge. Makes sense. But then, in '96, the Supreme Court said you can't technically embezzle data because when you copy it, the original owner still has it. It's not a physical good. Okay. But then jump to 2008 and the world of online gaming. In this huge case involving the game RuneScape, a court ruled that virtual items, an amulet and a mask, could be stolen because they were unique and had real-world economic value. It's just wild to see the law stretching itself to fit our new digital reality. All right, our last category changes the focus completely. It's not about the computer or the network anymore. Here, the crime is the content. The data itself is what's illegal to create, share, or even just have. And the most prosecuted crime here is, by a long shot, child pornography. In fact, it's pretty telling that this was the only content crime that all 46 countries who signed the convention could agree on making illegal. The legal details get super specific. The definition now includes virtual or computer-generated images. English courts have said that just downloading an image is legally the same as making a copy. But, and this is important, possession requires that you know you have it and have control over it. So files that your web browser caches in the background without you even knowing, that might not be enough to get you convicted. When it comes to punishment for these offenses, it really comes down to the graphic nature of the content. If you look at the sentencing guidelines in England, for instance, they have different levels of severity. It goes all the way from level 1, which might be erotic posing, up to level 5 for the most horrific material involving things like sadism. And the penalties, as you can imagine, get much, much harsher as you go up that scale. So, this all brings us to the big question. What's the law's next move? Where do we possibly go from here, especially with technology moving at the speed of light? Well, if we look back to January 2009, you can see there was this incredible momentum. 46 different countries had all signed the Convention on Cybercrime. That shows a massive international agreement that, yeah, we need a shared rulebook for this stuff. But here's the reality check. Of those 46 countries that signed, only 23 had actually ratified it, meaning they actually made it a part of their own national law. It's so much easier to agree to something in principle than it is to actually put it into practice back home. And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? The core challenge, the one that's not going away, is figuring out how to get all these different legal traditions to work together, to harmonize, so we can actually police a digital world that has no borders. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. As technology gets faster and cybercriminals get smarter, is the law just doomed to forever be one step behind, always playing a game of catch-up?